In this lesson, we will identify some of the significant changes brought about during the early years of the Jefferson's presidency, provide examples of the declining power of the Federalists, and summarize the importance of the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark expedition. Thomas Jefferson can be seen here on the $2 bill if you're lucky enough to locate one. Jefferson wins presidential election of 1800. The election of 1800 was a very bitter campaign between John Adams, the current president, and Thomas Jefferson, who was his vice president. The vote is going to end in electoral deadlock. Jefferson is going to beat Adams for the presidency, but he ties with his running mate, Aaron Burr. In the situation of a tie, the House of Representatives has to vote to break the tie, and they cast ballots 35 times without being able to break the tie between Jefferson and Burr. Alexander Hamilton, who didn't like Jefferson but didn't like Aaron Burr even more, intervenes and talks some of the Federalists into giving Thomas Jefferson the victory and to changing their vote to vote for Jefferson. This reveals a flaw in the electoral process. To correct the flaw, they passed the 12th Amendment. Basically, the 12th Amendment states that electors will cast separate ballots for president and vice president, so that they will no longer have the president being the one who wins the most votes and the vice president being the one that gets the second most votes. You can see the breakdown of electoral votes on the first vote of the election of 1800 here in this bar graph. And you can also see that Hamilton lobbied for Jefferson to become president and for some of the Federalists to choose him over Aaron Burr, represented by this propaganda. Thomas Jefferson of Virginia. He was a very well-respected gentleman and scholar. He did some great things even before becoming president. He was the author of the Declaration of Independence. He was the father of the University of Virginia. He was governor of Virginia. He was a minister to France. He was Secretary of State under George Washington for 1 year until he stepped down. And then he will become President of the United States, and he will serve 2 terms. Jefferson tried to simplify the presidency. He did not trust government having too much power, which is reflected here in this quote. A government big enough to give you everything you want is strong enough to take everything you have. And if you read some of the Founding Fathers' advice here below, where I've indicated, you'll see that he's very hesitant to give the government too much power. Jefferson replaces some of the Federalists with Democratic Republicans, because of course he wants people of his own party to support him in his presidency. He reduces the size of the armed forces and cuts the social expenses of government, so there are no dinner parties at the White House. He eliminates internal taxes and reduces the influence of the Bank of the United States, because he disagreed with Alexander Hamilton and thought the bank gave the government too much power. He favors free trade over government-controlled trade and tariffs. So in a lot of ways, he scaled back the power of the presidency and tried to limit it substantially. Southern dominance of politics. Jefferson is the first president to take office in Washington, D.C. During this period, people from the South are dominating politics. The Northern Federalist influence is going to begin to decline. John Marshall and the Supreme Court. Federalist John Marshall is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and he was Chief Justice for more than 30 years. John Marshall is pictured here. Before he leaves office, on the last day, John Adams pushes through the Judiciary Act of 1801, which adds 16 federal judges to the already established court system from the Judiciary Act of 1789. Adams appoints all of these Federalist judges, when of course he knows that Thomas Jefferson is a Democratic Republican. They are called midnight judges because he appointed them right before he left office on his last day. Jefferson is going to protest and argue that the appointments are not valid because the official papers were never delivered to the people who were appointed, and a lot of them were never signed. Marbury versus Madison. William Marbury is one of the men who was appointed as a judge by John Adams before he left office, and he wants the job. So he sues to have the papers delivered so that he can sign them and take his position. The Judiciary Act of 1789 required that the Supreme Court order that the official papers have to be delivered. John Marshall is going to rule that this requirement is unconstitutional. And this ruling is important and is a landmark court case because it affirms the right of the Supreme Court to have what's called judicial review. The Supreme Court has the power to declare an act of Congress, which is a law, unconstitutional, and to reverse it. The United States expands west. From 1800 to 1810, the population of Ohio is going to grow from 45,000 to 231,000, which is a huge gain in population. Most settlers used the Cumberland Gap to reach Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. The Cumberland Gap is shown here on this map. In 1775, a man named Daniel Boone is going to lead the clearing of the Wilderness Road because, of course, no roads west existed until they were begun to be cleared, which becomes a major route for westward migration. On the map, the Wilderness Road extends from Virginia down through Kentucky onward to Tennessee. And this is a major route for people who were moving west. It was easy for them to use the road and safer for them to use a well-traveled road. The Louisiana Purchase. Louisiana was returned to France, and Jefferson was afraid of having a French presence so close to the United States-held territory. So after several attempts to try to purchase the port of New Orleans from France, Napoleon needs money to be able to continue to fight the war against Great Britain. So he agrees to sell all of the Louisiana territory for $15 million, which is a few cents an acre. Jefferson isn't sure that he even has constitutional authority to be able to do this, but he agrees to the deal anyway. The significance, why it's important, of the Louisiana Purchase is that it doubles the size of the United States. You can see in the map shown here the blue area, which is the existing United States, and then the brownish area, which is the Louisiana Purchase, purchased for $15 million from France. Lewis and Clark. Jefferson appoints a man named Meriwether Lewis to lead a secret expedition to explore the Louisiana Territory. Lewis chooses William Clark as second in command. The goals of the expedition were to find a new route to the Pacific Ocean, to gather information about people, plants, and animals, and to map the area. A Native American woman named Sacagawea serves as the interpreter and guide. The expedition takes 2 years and 4 months to complete and brings back to Jefferson a wealth of information about the area. We will further explore the expedition of Lewis and Clark at a later date in a different lesson.